The Missouri Senate is poised to take up a slew of hot-button issues over the next few months. That includes a ballot item changing the way Missouri does state legislative redistricting and an effort to eliminate a residency requirement for St. Louis police officers. At the center of these fierce public policy debates is Senate President Pro Tem Dave Schatz. The Sullivan Republican joins us on the latest edition of Politically Speaking to talk about the Senate's top priorities and how he's responding to Democratic pushback. Let's hit the music.
This is the Politically Speaking podcast, the definitive show about Missouri politics.
It's a little complicated in Bolivar because there is a Parsons family there.
But we also knew that it was important to make sure that we got to where we needed to go.
You know, if you walk in a room and you're getting ready to make a decision and everybody in the room looks like you need to stop.
And right now what happens in the United States Senate is as critical as anywhere else in the country.
I really want the state to succeed.
Well, we want everybody to know that we're all working together.
I just worked hard to try to build my name where I didn't have the money.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I am your host, St. Louis Public Radio's political correspondent, Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me in studio today is
Julie O'Donohue.
And joining us by phone in beautiful Jefferson City, Missouri, our special guest today is
State Senator Dave Schatz.
Thank you so much for joining us, especially after what was a very, very, very long night for you. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, and on Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, the Senate was debating a state legislative redistricting ballot item, and it's all revolving around an issue widely known as Clean Missouri. Senator, my first question for you is, what happened last night? What are you trying to do with that issue? And what should the people of Missouri know about what your caucus stands on the issue of state legislative redistricting?
Well, sure. Thanks, Jason. I will tell you that obviously, I think the one thing, if people had an opportunity to listen last night, they did hear a fair amount of debate on the issue and about the concerns about the issue, and I can go over them in detail. It did go on a lengthy process that lasted way into the night. I think I probably got out of here somewhere around the 4 a.m. time frame. And then we came back this morning about 10 o'clock to try to get into session and try to finish up business this week. But I think there was a healthy amount of debate. But I think at the end of the day, we want to process, and I think it's one of the number one priorities for our Republican caucus is this particular issue. We want a process that puts Missouri citizens in charge of drawing maps, not unelected, unaccountable political appointees. Bottom line. Background checks also that on current demographers of candidates, they need to be, they're ongoing right now. But at the end of the day, the way that Clean Missouri, I believe, was cleverly drawn and passed, but the portions of the redistricting part were tremendous in length, very difficult for, I think, voters to understand, even the process in which we draw political maps right now. And at the end of the day, what we believe is the most important thing is compactness and contiguity. First and foremost, they need to be equal distribution. That is the first criteria in which, when we draw political maps, we need to have equal distribution of constituents in those Senate districts, House districts. But I don't believe that fairness and competitiveness should take precedence over compactness and contiguity. And so my question, when we had conversations last night, how do you draw a competitive district in, per se, city of St. Louis when the majority of voters in St. Louis are Democrats? How do you get to a 50-50 map? Well, obviously, people complain about gerrymandering. This is the definition of gerrymandering. If you go into a district in St. Louis where it's predominantly held by Democratic constituents, and then you have to find competitiveness, you have to go out and gerrymander a district in order to get to that competitive nature. And I think compactness, contiguity is critical. And I think local representation, people that are involved in the community, represents the community far better than the process that they're proposing right now.
I'm going to play a clip now from Sean Sonker Nicholson. He is the campaign director of Clean Missouri, and he's going to explain, in his opinion, what the impact on competitiveness is in relation to Missouri legislative races will be if Clean Missouri is retained.
Princeton did an analysis on looking at the math of how the plans, how the math in the state constitution will work out. And their estimate was about 20% of the districts would be competitive. And that, of course, assumes that you've got candidates that are out there working, that are talking to voters, that are knocking doors. Like, candidates have still got to do their part, and that's great. Like, what we want is a world where how good the candidates are and how hard they're working and are they connecting with voters, that actually is the thing that matters.
Nicholson has also said that he disagrees with the idea that every district would have to be 50-50 under Clean Missouri. So I want you to respond to that contention. I also want you to respond to the basic principle behind that clip, that the system that the voters passed in 2018 is better because it'll increase the amount of competitive districts in the state.
Well, I think that, his contention that only 20% of the districts would, ultimately be competitive. What is the current percentage right now of the districts that are competitive? I mean, first and foremost, let's look at that and see. We have competitive districts right now. But I do believe that what we've talked about in the process of trying to create competitive districts, I kind of disagree with the notion, first and foremost, as we go through this process of how do we identify a party. Again, and in which we get there with a demographer, supposedly a nonpartisan demographer, making a determination as to draw a district and put people in political parties and to determine, what their vote outcome in order to be a competitive district. And some of the conversations I had on the floor last night, Jason, with Senator Shoup were this. I am a lifelong resident of Franklin County. Franklin County has been a portion of the 26th senatorial. Predominantly, I think that you would say that it's about a third Democrat, two-thirds Republican. And the people in Franklin County know the representation. I also represent part of western St. Louis County. But I think having people that live in the communities is critically important to representing them. And I don't necessarily believe that Franklin County would want to have to split that county down the middle, have someone represent them that maybe not even live in that particular county or have an interest in what happens in Franklin County or in the 26th senatorial district. So I think there's reasons why I believe it's far better to be involved, compact, contiguous districts that are communities that people are lived in, involved in. And again, I think the process that we've had over the past obviously has been, in question. But at the end of the day, we still believe that when you put the criteria in the way Clean Missouri has listed the criteria, starting with equal splits of the districts and then competitiveness is the number 2 criteria, number 3 criteria. How else do you, when you're trying to draw a map, do you not come up with the process that lends you to believe that be the top priority as you've been given that as the instructions to draw these maps from as a demographer?
I mean, is there a danger in kind of undoing what voters decided to do? I think we're seeing on the national stage Republicans argue that Democrats are right now trying to undo the election of the president. And to me, this kind of looks the same way. Like, you didn't like the outcome, and so now maybe you're trying to go back and change that. But the voters have said what they wanted.
Well, but again, the voters will say what they want again. This is not the legislature is giving the voters an opportunity to get another bite at the apple. And so I had this conversation
and what if
last
it gets
night.
and what if it gets voted down?
If it gets voted down, obviously, then I believe then we would have to say, well, this issue, we've given them our proposal, what we believe is right for Missouri. This proposal, this is the one they accepted. I think you're going to have a hard time at that point, if this thing fails, of coming back and trying to address that issue. But I will say this, because it is going back to the same voters. It's giving them the opportunity. So people saying that we're overturning or overturning the will of the vote, I think is not necessarily it's a true statement, because we're going back to those same voters, giving them an opportunity to choose what we believe is the right method, as opposed to the process in which this was developed. Now, I did in some of the debate last night talked about the process in which we spent hours last night, and we spent in committee going through how we believe this should be done. The process of Clean Missouri and the decisions that were made to list the redistricting portions of that, we don't know who did that. We don't know how long it took. We don't know if it was one individual. We don't know where it came from. But this is the one thing about the legislature. We have public testimony, public input, committee votes, debate on the floor through 2 chambers. Ultimately, And that's putting something before the voters that I think has been thoroughly vetted to the extent that, again, we don't know what happened in secret and dark when Clean Missouri was drafted or who was behind Clean Missouri. And so I think it's fair for us to go back and get another bite at the apple and ask voters to say, we think this is a better proposal.
One of the main things that Senator Hageman's bill would do is it would basically eliminate the demographer and have either bipartisan commissions or appellate judges draw the House and Senate maps. I'm going to play a clip now from Trent Skaggs. He's a former state legislator who served on the Senate commission that actually produced the map that, currently governs the Senate. And he's a Democrat, and he supports Clean Missouri. And he had this observation about how the commission process works.
My whole problem with redistricting is just the distrust you don't have people necessarily dealing in good faith, and you don't have people, and then when you think you're doing in good faith and you come to an agreement, when you leave, then people go back and talk to their various parties or different candidates, and things change again. And so there just was this inherent lack of trust between the committee members, even sometimes amongst your own party. And so that from that standpoint, I kind of view this as almost like the Missouri court plan, right, that was put in place in the 1940s. I mean, it's not perfect, but it at least builds back some of that trust.
Senator, I'm sure you watched the commission process pretty carefully in 2012. I can't really say that anyone who witnessed it thought that it went particularly smoothly, either with the commissions or the judges drawing the lines. Why do you think that would be a better system than the demographer holding all the power?
Well, but I think we do have concerns when you have a demographer. Obviously, I think the criteria in which the demographer is being chosen, I think that we have some real concerns about the quality of the candidates that are there. It doesn't provide a lot of guidance, and having one particular individual chosen by, to say they're nonpartisan, I mean, it's very, very difficult, and say that is a more trusted process. When you have a bipartisan commission made up of Republicans and Democrats that obviously have to have a consensus, to reach a consensus, they would need, I believe it's 70%. Maybe I've got that wrong.
I believe it's 7 out of 10, yes.
7 out of 10 have to come to a consensus on a map. If they can reach that consensus, how can there be scrutiny over that process? And if that consensus can't be met, obviously then it goes to judges. Obviously, judges, we believe, are fair and impartial, and partisanship should not occur in the judicial system. So if you think that judges going through this process, I mean, where would you want to put it, and whose hands at that point? If you cannot reach a consensus with a bipartisan commission, where should it go? Or should you just say that this supposed nonpartisan demographer is a better process? I don't think that's the case.
I have two quick questions before we move on to the next topic. Would the Republicans consider using the previous question to make sure that Senator Hageman's bill goes to the House?
Well, I think, Jason, in all fairness, we want to do everything we can to avoid that. We know the ramifications of having the majority, and I think to whom much is given, much is expected, and I believe that we are very aware of that. We've worked very closely with the minority leadership to make sure that we can get a resolution without having to take those measures, and then creating an environment that becomes hostile and difficult to work in. We want to respect the minority, but we also know that obviously that we have been given a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and we're going to have a healthy, lengthy discussion, and ultimately we believe that we can prevail on this issue with some compromise in the process. We're going to have disagreement, and we're not going to probably always at the end of the day say that we both got something out of this that we feel that was a win-win, but we're going to respect the minority, and hopefully we don't end up there.
My final question on this topic: would the Senate consider putting like an amendment on this that would have voters vote on this in August as opposed to November?
I don't know that we're going to do that. I think the governor has the opportunity to pick the ballot, the timing of the ballot, and when this thing goes before the voters. But I don't think that we're going to be placing any requirements on what election ballot this goes on.
I want to move on and talk about, I guess, the so-called gray machines that are popping up in gas stations and convenience stores and whatnot. So you were the first person that, I mean, I wasn't here last year, but my understanding is you were really the first person to raise this as an issue. You filed legislation last year to crack down on these machines, which I believe you think are illegal. What brought this to your attention?
Well, obviously, and you and I have a conversation about whether or not I drink Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, and how I prefer that. But where I go and get what I would consider my morning coffee is a local gas station in Franklin County. And obviously, these machines show up in my choice of where I purchase my fountain Diet Coke, and I'm looking at machines that are identical to gambling machines that you would find at a casino. And they're basically, they have language written on there that obviously they believe prohibits them or allows them to be there in this. And again, seeing that and knowing that I believe that the only places that have allowed legal gaming in the state of Missouri are casinos that are authorized by the Gaming Commission. And so that's where I first became aware, and seen these particular machines. And at that point, as we began to uncover and see that there's a tremendous number of these being deployed, what we're seeing is a diversion of dollars that the lottery receives based upon maybe where these machines have been deployed and about how lottery revenues and receipts have gone down where these machines exist. And so that conversation began. We were having conversations about the expansion of video lottery terminals in the state, but we could not deal with the illegal, what I believe to be illegal machines right now that are currently proliferating the state right now, and so it was important to file legislation. Unfortunately, did not make it completely across the finish line, and we filed that again. Senator Cunningham has filed it as well, but there is a court case right now currently in Platte County on the particular elements of these machines, whether or not they are legal gaming operations or not. And I think that we obviously need to see the outcome, but the Gaming Commission, which I believe is the authority on this issue, believes that per our statutes they're illegal and they're gambling devices as per our Constitution and our statutes prohibit.
So you and other senators have proposed bills that would crack down on these machines and punish the owners of businesses that had these machines in them. But last I saw, Governor Mike Parson was not convinced that these machines were illegal. It's been well documented that one of the owners of the companies that distributes these machines is a donor to Parson's PAC. Do you have any concerns that the governor doesn't have your perspective when it comes to the gray machines?
Again, I think that's maybe a mischaracterization of the governor's perspective on these particular machines. I think the governor I think his position would solidly be, that if these machines are deemed illegal, then obviously he is not as supportive of them going forward. I don't think there's in any shape, way that it could be construed any different. I think that maybe in his statement what he said is obviously there is a court is going to ultimately make that decision. So I don't think he's punting that decision, but there has been this concern because of gray area that's reportedly out there because local prosecutors and people are uncertain as to the terms of the law. And I think the governor is waiting for the facts to come in before, but again, I think he is solidly on the side of making sure that we do not have illegal gaming that's going on throughout the state, regardless of if someone's contributing to a PAC or political, action committee that may be affiliated with supporting him, in his reelection.
I understand that, but the Platte County case is unlikely to be resolved for several months, if not over a year. So in the meantime, what do you think the legislature might do about this issue? And are you concerned that the governor is going to want to wait for that case, which would determine whether the machines are illegal?
I don't necessarily believe that if we put a bill that enhances and clarifies potentially this particular issue on the governor's desk, I'm confident the governor would sign that. I don't have any concerns about that.
So do you, one last question on this topic, are you open to a compromise wherein the machines would be considered legal but taxed and regulated like slot machines? Or do you want them out of the stores?
I personally do not believe that any argument can be made that this is a great revenue generator enhancement for the state of Missouri by putting these machines out across our state. I'm not interested in trying to obtain revenue based upon that premise. I do not. If I want to go and stand in the casino and gamble, I'm perfectly able to do that, but I don't want to feel like every time I walk into a gas station that I've entered into a two-bit casino, and I have to tolerate that particular environment. So I reject it. I don't want to see them. I don't think there's communities out there that want them proliferating in their community as well. And so it's a topic, I think, that is going to take a lot of discussion before we see an expansion of gaming on that level.
We'll be right back after this quick break with Senate President Pro Tem Dave Schatz. And we're back on Politically Speaking with Senate President Pro Tem Dave Schatz. I want to talk about another piece of legislation that you've been carrying that's the talk of the St. Louis area, and that's a bill to get rid of the City of St. Louis's residency requirement. Now, this is an example, I guess, of bipartisan agreement, at least locally. St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson is a big supporter of this move, and it seems like it has the fast track to pass both chambers of the legislature. I want you to explain why you decided to get involved in this issue and why you think removing the residency requirement is a good idea.
Well, Jason, I think, obviously when we had the interim committees because of some of the public safety concerns in the St. Louis region and St. Louis County area that we've been trying to address, trying to find ways to improve safety and public safety in that area. Well, one way I believe it is critical to do that is to making sure that we have enough quality law enforcement candidates out there on the streets to do that. Currently, I think the city of St. Louis is short 120 plus officers to fill the number of opportunities that they have available for employment. And so putting more officers first and foremost is critical in order to enhance public safety. The residency requirement is hampering the department's ability to be able to attract qualified candidates. And so for them asking to get some relief from that, obviously, when they also see the potential number of people that are in the queue that could be retiring, and it only gets worse as we go forward. So having a barrier to get those employees in the door obviously is something we felt was critical for us to remove. Will it completely address that shortfall of issues? Obviously, it will be one thing. It will be one thing that will help. It will not be the only thing that helps, but it'll be one thing that will be help to attract people to that law enforcement. Obviously, law enforcement right now is an occupation that is struggling across our state, across the country, and finding people that want to enter into that field. And so we need to take any barriers that are currently out there existing that would prohibit someone from making that decision out of the way. And so I was glad to see that the mayor is supportive of that. The police is in support of it. And at the end of the day, I think it's an old process in which that has been tried for years, and I think we're seeing that people move away from it. That residency requirements are no longer necessary.
There has been some chatter in the Missouri House that the legislation may be altered to ban all residency requirements, including the one in Kansas City. What's your feeling on that? Because I could see that being a point of contention among Kansas City lawmakers that say, we don't want to get rid of our residency requirement. Kansas City is Kansas City is much larger geographically than St. Louis, and this should be a St. Louis only thing. What's the temperature on that?
Well, I think that what we need to hear from, obviously we've heard from some folks that are on that side of the issue who would like to see it applied statewide. I've heard from a lot of the officials in Kansas City that say, we're happy, it's not necessary, we're not having any concerns filling the job applicants that we have, and so we would like it to be left alone. But I've also heard from the Fraternal Order of Police, and I don't know if you went and talked to rank and file members that are in. Again, I'm not putting anybody on the spot, but if you visited with rank and file members from the Kansas City Police Department, whether or not they would like to have that residency requirement moved, I think you would get a mixed bag of answers.
Some quick hits before we let you go. I want to ask you about Medicaid expansion. There's a ballot initiative that's being circulated right now. I think the chances of it making the ballot are very high because there are powerful interest groups funding it. would the Missouri Senate be interested this session in coming up with their own version of Medicaid expansion that they could put their stamp on and they could control rather than leaving it up to the mercy of a ballot initiative to force the legislature's hand next year?
I think there are some things that are being proposed or being talked about that ultimately deal with the elements of Medicaid expansion. Whether or not that we are going to go down the path and say that we're willing to expand Medicaid, but I think the reality is that it's a significant cost to get Medicaid off the ground. And where does that money come from? And I have made this conversation and had it with folks, as recently as last week with my school superintendents. We talk about what we perceive to be the cost for Medicaid expansion and where does that money come from. Well, the proponents of Medicaid expansion don't give us any solutions to that. They're not proposing any funding mechanisms to provide for the expansion of that. And at the end of the day, people need to be looking at that because, where's the pot of money that we have, kind of discretionary ability to, if we're mandated for Medicaid expansion, well, it comes from education. That's where it would come from.
I just want to clarify, are you opposed to the ballot initiative that would expand Medicaid?
I am opposed to it. I mean, myself personally, obviously I'm opposed to it because obviously I don't think they come up with a funding solution that addresses the issues that as we appropriators here in the legislature are faced with.
I know there's been a lot of attention on rural hospitals and why they're closing and whether Medicaid expansion could prevent them from closing. Is there any chatter about what might be going on with rural hospitals and Medicaid expansion?
There is always a concern. I live in a community that has a rural hospital in Sullivan, Missouri.
And it is why I'm asking.
Yeah, and I'm fully aware of the dynamics that our hospitals are faced with and the Medicaid population, and obviously the issues that exist around there. And I'm very aware of that. And these hospitals in rural areas are critical and very, very important to these locations. And so I'm very well aware of that. But I think that also that at the end of the day, the decisions that we have to make are difficult, and we have to do what's in the best interest of the state in general. But I want to make sure our hospitals exist there, that are there for our communities, but also need to make sure that we're not sacrificing things in order to do something that we believe we can possibly take care of in another fashion.
How do you address the issue with rural hospitals, which is very much a real issue outside of Medicaid expansion?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I, completely have an answer because I understand the struggles. I have met with our hospital administrators locally and visited with them, and I understand the challenges they face as well. I mean, the uncompensated care, the number of dollars that are uncompensated care. But I can tell you this, that a lot of these hospitals, if they said the only thing that they were able to survive on was the Medicaid population and the reimbursements from Medicaid, they couldn't afford to exist on that either. It would help. Medicaid expansion would help a certain portion of the population, but it's not the magic answer that's going to keep rural hospitals afloat because obviously, only a Medicaid population would make it difficult for them to exist as well.
A couple more topics. I know you sponsored legislation dealing with the auditor. There's been a big brouhaha in the Capitol about Auditor Galloway's impending audit of former Attorney General Josh Hawley. What have you done on this issue, and how would you respond to Democratic criticism that this Republican attention on the Hawley audit is aimed at trying to discredit it before it's released?
Well, I think the bill that I filed obviously is a bill that we have a statutory requirement to audit the auditor's office every other year. When we talk about, the issues maybe surrounding the Hawley audit and or the lieutenant governor's office when he was there, I think there is some discrepancies there that obviously the auditor needs to address on the amount of time that it took compared to the amount of time it took to do Governor Nixon's closeout audit. I think just recently here this week in testimony, the head of audits in testimony in the committee indicated that the individual in question that potentially could have been either a campaign staff or a contributor to Senator McCaskill has been removed from the Hawley audit.
It was a you're talking about Bobby Showers. He was a contributor, and he might have posted something on social media saying something disparaging about President Trump. I don't think he was a staffer. I think you're referring to David Kirby.
I say or a contributor. I wasn't sure if he was a staffer.
I just wanted to make that clear for our audience, but continue.
So he was, a contributor. But again, I think, that, having someone and some of the comments that were potentially made either in an email, a conversation, or a Facebook post, obviously when we have, people need to have faith in the integrity of the auditor's office, and obviously when that is kind of a cloud looming over it, I think it was important for them to take steps to address that issue.
Now, Julie has a question she's been wanting to ask you for a long time, and we're going to wrap up this interview with that.
I want to ask all the senators. So the Missouri Senate committee meetings are not streamed online. You cannot watch them. You can watch the Missouri House committee meetings. And for what it's worth, I've worked in a couple different states where I could also watch all the committee meetings at the local state house. So I want to know why the Senate committee meetings aren't available to stream and whether there's been any discussion about changing that.
I will say that it's not a topic that has really came about with a lot of hitting my radar screen as to why aren't we doing this. I mean, obviously you're bringing this question to me today. I will look into it and again try to come up with some reasons if there are reasons for or against. But I think that I don't know that there's necessarily opposition or reason why we don't do it, or whether there's some problems with equipping these. I mean, one thing, we are a little bit challenged for space and committee hearing rooms and the process in which we are able to navigate back and forth. I'm not sure how difficult it is to just live stream those communications, but I will look into that and see what is the history and the background on that, and when the House adopted to stream their committee hearings. And hopefully the next time we talk, I'll have an answer for you as to where we stand on that issue.
Julie O'Donoghue getting results from Missouri state government.
Thank you, sir. I mean, selfishly, obviously, I'm a journalist based in St. Louis, so it affects me personally. But on a more serious note, I think there are people with disabilities or just that don't have the means to go to Jefferson City, and sometimes they want to watch discussion of bills that are relevant to their issues.
I fully understand, and again, we want people to be able to have access to to these particular issues. Like I said, when we have open and public testimony, when people come forward, again, I don't know, I can't specific to why it hasn't occurred yet, but again, I'm willing to look into it and try to move forward on the issue.
No, I hear you. Thank you so much.
We're out of time now. For all of our stories, stlpublicradio.org. Follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. How can people follow you on Twitter, Julie?
At JS O'Donoghue.
And we can follow the senator at Dave Schatz 26. Is that correct?
There you go.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator, and until next time, so long.
Every day I wake up, I'm a chief. When I walk out the door, I'm a chief. White, yellow, red hat like a chief. If I had a long day, I'm a chief. What you tell 'em, man? Hey, every day I'm a chief. What you tell 'em, man? Hey, every day I'm a chief. What you tell 'em?